Good evening, church. So a couple of months ago, my daughter-in-law, Lacey, went through 27 hours of intense labor, and I was kicked out of the room the final 2 or 3 hours, but my understanding is it got pretty chaotic in there, and things were going, it was pretty difficult time for her. It was told to me that various doctors and nurses, including neonatal intensive care nurses, were coming in and out of the room and shuffling about. Lights were flashing, monitors were beeping. At one point, her epidural line became disconnected. They didn't realize it, and they had to discover that and reconnect it. And so with her husband and her mom and her mother-in-law looking on and encouraging her, she had to block out all that commotion and push through. And eventually, aided by a vacuum suction, little Bradford finally emerged. And unfortunately, he had to be whisked away immediately because he was blue in the face. More activity, more commotion, more difficulty. And so with Lacey nearly passed out from exhaustion, the activity continued to swirl around her. Well, once things settled down, my wife had an opportunity to talk to one of the nurses, and they reflected on the scene that had just unfolded that morning. And Janet said something like, that was kind of crazy. There was a lot of intense activity going on. When I had children, I had a very different perspective, being up in the bed, and I don't remember that much activity, although it was still painful. And Janet asked this nurse, she said, were you ever truly concerned that things were not going to turn out well? Like, could this have gone wrong, or what were you thinking? And this is what the nurse told her. She said, whenever I'm on a plane and there is a lot of turbulence, like the plane is bouncing around in a storm, I watch the flight attendants. If they are calm and are professionally handling their responsibilities, I don't worry too much. But if a flight attendant starts to panic, starts to freak out, I get a little nervous. I figure something must be wrong. And the same goes with nurses. She said, there was a lot of activity in the room this morning. People were moving about and checking on things and handling responsibilities. There was a sense of urgency for sure, but if you look closely at our faces, you wouldn't have seen any panic. Things may have seemed frantic, but we had control of the situation throughout. We were just doing our jobs, just like those flight attendants. Well, about 2,000 years before Bradford's birth, Jesus and his apostles were on a boat on the Sea of Galilee. And if you want to turn to Mark chapter 4, we're going to be reading from there. Mark chapter 4, starting in verse 35. On that day when evening had come, he said to them, let us go across to the other side. And leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat, just as he was. And other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat, so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith? And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Well, I hope you are in awe of that miracle. I hope it is awe-inspiring to you. And I hope that you appreciate the happy ending. It turns out well for them. But don't miss an incredibly important detail of the story. With the boat seemingly about to be capsized and all the men lost at sea, Jesus was in the back of the boat asleep. It must have been a comfortable cushion. When your loved one is going through the most physically difficult few hours of her life, and you look into the calm eyes and see the steady hands of her labor and delivery nurses, your anxiety should diminish. They've got this. When your plane is being tossed about and you look into the confident eyes of your flight attendants, it should calm your nerves. They and the pilots are trained professionals. They've got this. And when you're in a violent storm on the Sea of Galilee and your world is turning upside down, why not look over at the Creator and Sustainer and Savior of the world who is nearby in the back of the boat? Had the apostles done so initially, before focusing on their dire circumstances, they would have found him resting peacefully. They would have found their Savior asleep, not a concern in the world. He's got this. So I don't know what storm you all are going through tonight. Maybe you're facing a serious health challenge. Perhaps you're struggling to pay the bills and put food on the table. Maybe your marriage is on life support and you feel like your whole world is being tossed about. Whatever storm you're in tonight, let me remind you that if you're a Christian, Jesus is always present. He wants you to share your concerns with him through prayer. He has comforting words that he wants to share with you through his holy word. He's involved. He cares. He's not going anywhere. Look at him. He's got this. If you're not a Christian tonight, you have an opportunity to become one. You can come down tonight. We can take your confession and baptize you in these very waters, and you can come up out of that watery grave and experience the peace, the perfect peace that can only come from a relationship with Jesus. Or maybe you are a Christian tonight. Maybe you've been up in the water before and you're a Christian, but the storms of life have tossed you about. You've lost sight of the Savior, and you're down, and you need our prayers and you need our encouragement to get your sights back on God. Whatever we can help you with tonight, we invite you to come as together we stand and sing.